Hello, ma'am. I welcome you to my podcast. I'm really thankful that you gave me time for coming onto this podcast.
Pleasure is all my, Chandan, for inviting me on this platform and to allow me to share my views.
So, before asking you anything for the audience, I just want to ask this very simple thing. So, tell the audience about yourself, who you are, and what you do, something that you can share.
For sure. So, people know me by the name of Dr. Renu Mishra. And as of now, I'm residing in Dubai, UAE. Prior coming to Dubai, of course, I'm a Delhiite by heart and by nature as well. So currently, I'm associated in the capacity of assistant professor and training partner. While talking about assistant professor, I'm working with Capital University College UAE and Gulf American University UAE, and I am associated as training partner with Excellence Brings Success, which is a Delhi-based training provider. While talking about my stint in Delhi, I worked as assistant professor with the Management Institute in Delhi for good for 4.5 years. I pursued my PhD from Jamia Hamdard. I'm sure your viewers must be known about this name. This is yes, it is a Delhi-based university. And as far as my schooling and my professional education goes, that also is based in Delhi only.
So, one thing,
Yes.
like before we jump on that, how does a Delhiite feels in Dubai?
To be very true, a Delhiite, once a Delhiite is always a Delhiite. Yes, yes. You know what? When I came in here, I had some own set of my expectations, be it in term of culture, be it in term of profession. So Dubai offers you all. If I tell you little more about my background, I am a Delhi University student. And when it comes to college, I passed out from Kirodimal College, which is, I think, is a lot more known about its education and studies than how the students are happening there. So, that runs into my personality, and I carried on the same legacy when I did my MBA in HR from IP University. And subsequently, I followed the same in my stint as assistant professor also. So Dubai offers you and it accommodates you as whatever kind of personality you are. So I did not find much of difficulty being a Delhiite or being from India to settle here. And thankfully, I met like-minded people professionally as well as personally. So it allowed me to have a better settlement, with due course and time. So I'm enjoying here.
So when I saw your profile on LinkedIn, that's when I came to know that you did your BSc in biology, and
Yes.
then you did your MBA in HR. So how did this turn took place? Like from biology to HR, or is like humans are also animals, so that might have made a sense in that way.
As of now, I'm feeling like Chetan Bhagat. Reason being, I started my reading journey by reading Chetan Bhagat, and I have, come across a lot of his interviews wherein he has been asked the same question that what made you to do MBA after engineering? So I'm, feeling like same. So yes, I did my graduation in animal biology, which is, profoundly called as zoology. Uh, while doing my graduation only, I realized my passion for teaching because what I think all of us do, we do tuitions, we provide tuitions in order to earn our pocket money. So I was also from the same genre and I started taking tuition, and with that step I realized this is something which I enjoy. This is something which I not only am doing for the pocket money thing, but I now enjoy interacting with students. I enjoying delivering them and learning with them along wise. So once my graduation was over, so I had the option of, pursuing my MSc with Delhi University. Obviously, you need to go for undergo certain entrance test and all. But I was sure that zoology studying further is something which I do not want. I do not want anymore. I want to do something which is more relative to the people, where I can interact with them, and I love talking. I love to deliver speeches and sessions, and alongside I like to meet, intellectual people. Having said that, I did not mean this that, you can't do the same by pursuing zoology and so, but somehow I did not found my connect with zoology pursuing it further. So this is the time when I'm talking about like 2006 when I
Mhm.
when I started my MBA, and that time management studies was all, were in rage.
Mhm.
So it was not just a very random step. I probably, properly researched about it, that what all are the options available, would be options available after I'm done with my MBA. So
Mhm.
teaching was one prominent
Mhm.
option which was available that time, that yes, that can be pursued, and you can get in touch with management people and networking. So all these things, attracted me a lot.
Mhm.
So then and there, I decided that yes, this is something which I would like to go for, and I would definitely would like to see myself in a long run in this profession of teaching. That's why I decided to go for MBA.
I can relate to one thing that you said. Like many of us actually like to go out and meet people and talk to them and all that stuff. So, being a PhD scholar, one of the best ways to actually go out and meet some people is through a conference. Like whenever there
Yes,
is a conference, we will submit a paper. We'll go there. We'll talk to the others who are being there. But from last 2 years, all the conferences are being held online, and that
yes,
doesn't make any sense. So that one part of interacting with anyone while going at the conference is gone. So how can a person fulfill that gap? Like he wants to meet the person. Like I am just asking this for myself. I want to go out and meet everybody, and the conferences are the best way to do that. But since now they are happening online, so that way is gone. So now how I will go ahead and fulfill that gap in this case?
see, very rightly said by you, Chandan, that if a person, if an individual has an inclination towards meeting people, or which we very popularly known as networking.
Mhm.
So attending conferences, attending seminars, which we now call as webinars, is one of the most profound way where we can connect people. Yes, attributed to the current scenario pandemic, it has been limited. But even though you are being virtually present, so try to deliver on those virtually organized conferences. See, meeting people is, physically is restricted, but
Mhm.
I would still say that it is not completely over and done. No, it is not.
Mhm.
Because virtual platform does provide you with an opportunity to interact with people.
Mhm.
See, we need to understand the difference. Do we want, do we need to interact with people, or we just want to meet them? We need to
Okay.
understand a difference, right?
Mhm.
So primary thing is to interact with them. So
Mhm.
that interaction can still, and I'm ready to share my experience that I still attend many conferences. The digital platform does allow you an opportunity to interact with people. And let me tell you one more thing, that since these conferences are being organized, because since we are talking in
Mhm.
respect to conferences only,
Mhm.
you will find a lot of intellects coming over on that platform. Because see, when these conferences were organized in physical setup, it's
Mhm.
not always possible to every intellect to come and deliver themselves, because
Obviously.
owing to their busy schedules. So even it happened quite a few times with me also, because I was not able to physically be present there. I also wish that there should be some opportunities that by which I can attend these conferences without being there. That was a
Mhm.
thought, honestly speaking, came to my mind.
Mhm.
But since these virtual conferences in there, you come across really highly intellect people, and you get the opportunity to talk to them, and you get the opportunity to learn from them.
Okay.
I would say that interaction is not limited.
So as you said,
Hmm.
meeting and interaction, there are
Yes,
two things, right?
yes,
How are they two not same?
see, when you talk about meeting a people, It's just that, you are probably like introducing themselves, and your impression may not be that last long in their minds. When you interact with an individual, you are actually exchanging thoughts.
Okay.
Getting my point? You are allowing them to share their thoughts, and you are expressing yourself too. It's a step next to just meeting.
So interaction comes after the meeting, right?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
But
Right.
my point is, if meeting is not only happening,
Yeah.
then interaction does not make any sense.
See, that's what I'm saying. When you talk about these virtual events, right?
Mhm.
So they allow you to interact. Like, I'll give you an example.
Mhm.
A couple of months back, like not very far, like in May month, I happened to attend a virtual conference on the changes attributed to pandemic in higher education
Mhm.
on the level of pedagogy which should be adapted in the higher education teaching. So there were a lot of educators were there, even the corporate professionals were there, and across the globe, it was an international virtual conference. So I happened to interact. Now I would say the word interact with professors who are in many of the Western universities, with the corporates who are in trainings and in industry. There, I need not to introduce myself that I'm so and so and I'm so and so. Probably, they give you an option to probably type your query or share your opinion. And if you want to meet them in separate,
Mhm.
so you can, exchange your your email IDs, and then you can interact with them later in your personal domain.
Mhm.
When it comes to interaction, yes, I was able to interact with them. I was able to get my few queries which I had been with struggling with since a long time, because since I'm also a teacher, so I'm also regularly keep looking for some interesting ideas to engage the students. So I was able to get some very fruitful answers. So yes, my interaction was there, very well there.
So coming back to the point that we started. So initially you were an assistant professor at an NIMS Delhi, and now you are a faculty in UAE. So I just want to know how this journey has been, and how the styles of teaching and how the education is different from in this way from NIMS to UAE.
Okay, so let me just take you a little back in time.
Hmm.
When I started my teaching career with NIMS, so I was a MBA only. I was just a graduate. Okay. So after having a stint of teaching for a year or so, I did some certification course, some diploma also. Like in industrial relations, I did, and training and development, I did. Reason for the same is, as and when I was progressing in my teaching, particularly in HR, I was intrigued by identifying each and every domain of HR. So
Hmm.
just to add in that, soon after my MBA, I did worked for a corporate for good 6 to 8 months, and there I learned about recruitment and selection, headhunting. So that was the one domain where I understood there.
Hmm.
And after my teaching, I did in industrial relations training. So I was continuously on a spree of developing myself, that just plain MBA would not do and would not be let me fulfilling my aim of becoming a teacher, which is not
Hmm.
just speaking in the class.
Hmm.
And then I enrolled myself into PhD after clearing my JRF. Soon after I did my PhD, I was fortunate enough to move to UAE. Okay.
Hmm.
So now, coming back to your question, which was asking that how is the teaching style different and how the education is different in India and UAE. See, teaching style, if I say that teaching style is all depend upon the teacher. That's what my
Hmm.
personal opinion is.
Hmm.
If I like to interact with my students, if I like to have a two-way discussion in my class, be it I'm in India or be it I'm in Indonesia, be it I'm in UAE, I would do the same, because my motto is to interact with my students. My motto is to let the class be a happening event. Second thing, yes, in India, we have a known category of the students. When I say category, I mean The cultural background of the students is what we are aware of, because they and us are from the same surroundings.
Mm.
When it comes to place like UA, you are engaged in teaching with a multicultural background of students. There you need to adopt varied degree of styles of teaching, right? And yes, in UA, like I am currently teaching UK curriculum and US curriculum both.
Mm.
So there is a substantial difference between what we taught back there in India,
Mm.
which is more of, the theory based approach, but we are still, we are in a process of changing with the introduction of national education policy and so case based teaching has definitely introduced in India, but
Mm.
it was not much there while I'm talking about the time of 2008. It was not that prevalent. That's
Mm.
what in my opinion.
Mm.
However, I started in UA in 2018, 19. So here it is more of case-based approach. Here it is more of interacting. Maybe it is, because of the multicultural students what we get. So
Mm.
that's the basic difference. But if I talk about my teaching style, I think it is, it is the same, because I like more of interactive class sessions.
Okay. I just came just like testing in my mind. Like for a teacher who is teaching a class, the
Hmm.
best feedback for that teacher is the facial expressions of the students. That's how we get the most of our feedback. Like, are they actually getting a point or not? But if we talk about the online courses these days, most of the students don't even prefer to turn on their cameras. They are
Absolutely.
like, no. So in this case, that feedback is totally missing. So
Yes.
how do you compensate for that in your courses, like when you teach, or do you always go for offline? Like when you go for online, so how you make up for that?
See, online Chandar is, it's not a choice with us. We
Mhm.
have to be online and this. And yes, you rightly said that the live facial expressions of the students is the instant feedback which we as a teacher receive. What you said that yes, students prefer to keep their cameras off is also the same. In fact, I think majority of the teachers, they face the same issues, right? But I also initially had the same hassle. The same students who were, quite interactive in my classes offline, I found that, they were not that, I was sensing that missing of that zeal in those students when we started with the online thing. But then, you know what, I slightly had a change in my teaching pedagogy,
Okay.
because the offline classes allow you to move into the classes. You have your face-to-face interaction with the students, and you can personally let them know that we are focusing on them. I had to slightly change my teaching for pedagogy. I made it more interactive, because more of lecturing session, I switched to more of interactive lecturing, as in with the video sessions, with more of creativity in my slides.
Okay.
So in order to see that, in order to learn from that, you need to generate a curiosity in the students. And that's where we started, that let's not have a regular session, let's have a discussion. So I used to give them some articles.
Mhm.
Okay, let's have a discussion with them. I used to treat them with advertisements. Let's talk about them. We had discussed, see, the generation of the students is like they are very much crazy about Starbucks, McDonald's. So
Mhm.
I searched and I, actually presented them with the case studies, yeah, with the advertisements, with the videos of the products which they like.
Okay.
Because if I'm talking to them like, Apple so and so CEO has done that, majority of them probably might not relate with it. So
Mhm.
I, transform my teaching pedagogy in such a way so that they relate.
Mhm.
They should not feel at the end of the days of we are boring. No, they should relate it with that. They should be able to question me. So when they question you, that means they are attentive.
Obviously, obviously.
So there we put forward one situation, kindly turn on your cameras.
Okay.
So the moment you being a teacher is able to generate that curiosity that they
Mm,
come up with their queries, they come
mm,
up with the questions, that means yes, they are attentive. Yes, they are listening to you.
mm.
So I just transformed my teaching pedagogy. I changed it according to the virtual sessions.
So one of the aspects of your profile and the works that you have done till now is talent management. So what is that and how does that work? Please tell us about that.
See, a very nice question, Chandan, because this way I feel like the entire facade of higher education is getting importance because talent management is generally what everybody understand is a corporate term, right?
Mm,
That you are filling up right number of people at right time, developing their skills and preparing them to so as to take the position in the business organization. We being a educator, we being a facilitator, I would like to say, are the first step
mm,
who are initiating talent management. I'll tell you how.
mm,
See, once a graduate
mm,
comes out of a college, he or she should be a ready-made product.
mm,
Sorry to say that product, but yes,
mm,
we are preparing something which can be given to the corporate.
understood. Yes.
So it's our responsibility, and I think a teacher is the first person. A
Mm,
teacher is the first responsibility, first responsible individual who takes care of that talent management by developing the required skills in the students.
mm,
So all these trainings with companies conduct, later on they develop their employees, they happen afterwards.
mm,
Once they are in that role,
mm,
but we as a teacher prepare our students to develop in a holistic manner.
mm,
We not only technically preparing them, we are emotionally also making them strong. We are letting them understand what is emotional question, what is time management, what is stress management, along with teaching them the technicalities of business corporations like marketing, HR, and what not. Right,
mm,
this is the business aspect, and otherwise also the respective modules which students are taking. So
mm,
we are basically developing the skills in them. We are training them so
mm.
that they can get absorbed in the required job, and then further trainings are the responsibilities of organization. So we are initiating that talent management process.
Mm. Great. So, one of the things that I had in my mind long time back, like it was a kind of an idea of a startup. Like if we can go to an industry and ask them that, okay, you want to hire five of the people for this role, right?
Hmm.
So you just tell us like what are the things that you want in that person, like when that person joins, what works should he or she be able to do, and before actually making them join the industry, like giving and hands on all of these works to that person, so that when that person actually joins that industry, he knows the basic things, and then he comes on to start the work. Because what happens with me, like when I have to hire an electronics engineer, in the degree they are taught so many things, but what I need them to be working are something that they have heard but they have not worked on them. So I had this thing in my mind, like if somebody could train them according to my needs and then they come and join me, so that part where I have to come and teach them that okay, you do this like this, you do this like this, and then make them work, that will be safe. So what do you think about this idea, and can this work if implemented?
Definitely it will work, and I think it has been practicing also.
Okay.
See, let me tell you one thing, that why corporates think that, if the candidate which we are being going to hire,
Mm,
if we can have that candidate already instilled with the skills and the competencies which he or she would be requiring in our organization.
mm,
Why? Because, many a times it has been found that the candidate himself or herself treat the organization as a training institute. So
Hmm.
they learn from them and they,
Leave.
leave. So
Hmm.
in order to avoid from that situation, this idea can readily work, and also this will accommodate a lot more important role of us, you
Hmm.
know, the higher education teachers or the
Hmm.
facilitators. We actually can get involved in the trainings of these students. See, for
Hmm.
instance, the dissertation or the project, the 2 month project, which MBA
Hmm.
has to do, or an MBA, MBBS also for that matter, they have to do some, the 6 months internship and so on. There are various courses which involve these kind of internship or apprenticeship training or the, project based training. These trainings are actually designed in a larger picture to let the students be equipped with
Hmm.
the fact that yes, this is the kind of setup you are going to face when you are going to actually work in a corporate setting. But yes, sadly, the situation is these project-based training, these internships are not that, effectively designed.
Hmm.
They are merely just being treated as a requirement to fulfill a degree.
Hmm.
If we put a slight more thrust
Hmm.
on the effective designing of these degrees, that whatever the kind of specialization a student wish to take on,
Hmm.
whatever the interest area the student has, showcased during the course of time, he or she should be designated that kind of training that will actually prepare them so as to make a candidate already equipped with the competencies required in the corporates.
Hmm.
So this, I think it's a very legitimate demand from the corporates, that we are not getting the right kind of candidates. That's absolutely true. So if, you know, the candidates can be trained before their actual job and after or in between their course with the skills which they will going to, showcase or exhibit during their job, it'll be wonders. And it is actually happening also. However, the uniform application and the universal application and the amendments in these project trainings is very much needed.
So talking about the in industry job, like PhD, after we have done a PhD, the two things that we can go, either we can go in academic or we can go in industry. So if a PhD student, he or she wishes to join the industry after the PhD. So what are the things that he or she should take care of while doing the PhD so that he can easily join an industry after doing the PhD?
Okay. So if a candidate who is, I should say, if a researcher
Hmm.
who is undergoing the course of PhD and wishes to join
Hmm.
corporate, first of all, that is a very, that is taken to be a very unusual choice, which is absolutely not. Because, I like your question very much because generally people think that you're doing a PhD, so you'll eventually go into academics, which is
Hmm.
absolutely not. Right. So while the course of PhD, if when a researcher is undergoing the process, so do not forget to connect with the people. Yes, do not forget to connect with the people. Your networking is very important. Because see, when you are a researcher during the course of data collection, right? During attending and delivering the sessions, maybe in the same institute or another places, or attending some conferences or seminars. So you meet people from corporate industry as well, right? And even if you are meeting with the academic people, they are further connected,
Hmm.
right? So it's very important to connect with the people. And that's what I'm telling from my personal experience.
Hmm.
Connection, networking is very important. Networking is very important. Second thing is work on your CV. See, we generally being a researcher, never put so much of trust that the kind of CV we develop, it is more of academic oriented,
Hmm.
right? So redesigning your CV as per showcasing and fulfilling it to the corporate needs is very important.
Mm.
Your CV, being a researcher, should reflect that yes, you have an inclination and you have all the skills and competency which is required by a corporate.
Mm.
Networking and your CV.
Mm.
Then comes your skills. See,
Mm.
not forget. See, skills are very, see, you are already in a research. You are working in a dedicated topic and you put your blood, heart and soul in researching a particular topic. My suggestion would be that gone are the times that you are just living with one topic for good 4 to 5 years and then you come up to, and then I want a job. No,
Mm.
those times are gone. You need to get in touch. That I'm not saying that if you are pursuing your PhD in marketing, so just go for some accounting skill course, certificate course. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is if you're pursuing your PhD in marketing, get in touch with what is happening on the digital world of marketing, because this is
Mm.
something which is off of the town these days. If you're
Mm.
pursuing your PhD in HR, then just not focus on training and development, which is your topic. Talk also about artificial intelligence, which is the talk of the town in HR.
Mm.
So always be in touch on the latest development, latest introductions in terms of your skills of your domain.
Mm.
So by the end of your PhD, you are not just the master of your own topic. You are
Mm.
actually aware of what all happening in your domain.
Okay.
So remain connected, work on your CV, please develop your skills. Taking additional knowledge is never an harm,
Mm.
is never a harm, right? So, and what a corporate see is that how much you will be beneficial for them. See, eventually everybody talks about ROI, right? So if they are investing in you, they do not want a teacher. They
Mm.
want somebody who can be, who can prove to be an asset for their organization. So develop yourself as a holistic package that if not this, I have this. If
Mm.
not this, I have this.
Mm.
Another thing is work on your LinkedIn profile,
Okay.
which is often neglected. Not nowadays, people have started coming a lot on LinkedIn profile. But, being a researcher, we are so much involved in our work that we at times ignore things are happening. And by the time we are done with our work, by the time we are done with the PhD, we see, oh, the world has already moved 5 years ahead,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So please mark your presence on LinkedIn. Not only mark your presence, update your presence,
Mm.
which will also allow you to negotiate in future.
Mm.
So your networking, your skills, your social media presence, it will give you altogether a common package so that you can, have a better negotiation. You can have a better package of negotiation skills by the end of PhD, which will pave the way for you to go into industry.
So I just come across this one thing. Like I was talking to a person who has just finished a PhD, and she was like, "I don't know which job to approach." Like she has done the PhD, she has done everything. Now thinking about the industry, she was like, "I don't know which job to apply for or which job to approach." So how can a person know that thing?
Absolutely. See, being a PhD, definitely it is a well-known fact that definitely there is something good in us. That's why we are in PhD. Okay.
Mm.
So we need to identify what we are good at.
Mm.
I am not talking about domain specific PhD.
Mm.
So I'll be talking about your skills as of now. See,
Mm.
if a person is good in literature review,
Mm.
right, that means you are good in reviewing the literature, reviewing the articles, you are good in writing.
Mm.
So think about the career that ways. If you are good in analysis part, and let's say you are doing a finance PhD and you're very good in analysis part, so you can go in accountant related job. You can go for, or the specifications or specificated job which allows you to analyze the numbers. If you are good in, let's say, research methodology, you can go in marketing research, you can go the jobs which allows you to explore your potential in research and development. So first of all, you need to identify, see, everybody can't be good in research methodology, everybody can't be good in SPSS. That does not mean that if we are not good at one aspect, we are not good in another too. So you need to identify in what areas you are good at. Then, coming to your own domain, if you are good in your own domain, let's say I am good in literature review and I am pursuing my PhD in HR, right? So I can go in any, consulting kind of jobs also, where I'm supposed to suffice the organization with all the researches which are happening on that particular area of, let's say, training and development, let's say performance management, let's say artificial intelligence in HR. So I can, I can prove to be a asset for the organization. I can provide them the researches based on the particular topic. So you need to identify what you are good at. First, do your competency mappings, do your skill assessment, identify what I am good at. And always, this my suggestion is, never ever, feel ashamed that I am bad at this thing. Everybody can't be perfect in everything, but focus on the areas where you are good at, and there are opportunities in relation to each and every skills. So if you are good in analyzing literature, you are good in reviewing the articles, you can go for content also. If you're good for research methodology, qualitative data and the quantitative data, you can go for digital research, you can go for marketing research, you can go for research and development. So there are options available, there are.
So as we are talking, okay, like after PhD, we are going to join a job, and one of the biggest skills that I feel that we need while we are at a job or we are even applying for a job is our negotiation skills. Like how do we
Absolutely.
are going to talk about a salary structure, how we are going to talk about what kind of work that we are going to get, how we are going to talk about what kind of position we are going to get. And this I have seen, like even while doing my PhD, I had to work on these skills. So these skills are not in the those who are doing the PhD. So how they can improve these skills in them?
Very nice question, Chandan. And I would say that while being a researcher, these are the skills which are majority, we ignore. We do not pay much attention. So because we are, we are so much into our books, or we are so much into our thesis, that we completely forget about these skills. See, first we need to understand the negotiation skills and the importance of negotiation skills. Negotiation skills basically allow you to combat the situations wherein you get into a win-win kind of conclusion, right? So these kind of skills you'll be in you'll be using them once you are going for your job, irrespective you're going for academic job or for an industry job. So I'm not talking about that. Negotiation skills comes in with good communication, your confidence, your skills definitely, and not to forget how well you can negotiate for your money, the salary part, right? So talking about these kind of skills, do not neglect or do not avoid, do not miss any opportunity where you are being given chance to present.
Okay.
That will help you to improve your communication part. That will help you to present yourself. See, and mark my words, I'm saying it from my own personal experience. The moment you overcome that feeling that, yes, I can interact with people, no matter what is the size of the group, that kicks you with a confidence, which is which is an addition to the negotiation skill. The moment you get that confidence, and second thing where you get that confidence from, your skills. Never ever, forget that, yes, I'm a PhD. PhD do not only gives you a title of doctor, it is actually preparing you a master of a skill, master of a topic, master of the title, which is keeping you ahead from many. So you know something which majority of the people does not know. They are not even aware of. So that is the power of skill. So negotiation comes with your, the power of negotiating comes with your good communication, your confidence level, your skill. And the moment you are good at these things, no, you will be able to negotiate on the monetary aspect. And this would be my suggestion to all the researchers, that do not underestimate yourself. Right. The day you decided that yes, I gonna start with my PhD, that day only you have taken a step ahead from many. Right. And you are equipped, you are getting equipped with lot of skills which market does not have. And you know what? This is a misconception that a non-PhD is more in demand than in corporates than a PhD. No. Corporates still want more number of PhD and they pay them good. Again, that all depends, as what you said, that, how to, ask for that salary. See, no one has time to dig into your skill set unless and until you present them.
Obviously.
Take part in as much as number of conferences, seminars, webinars, and even if they are, the times has like, the virtual things are happening, situations are still coming in the normalcy thing, but do not hesitate even being a part of this virtual setup of events. You'll get to know something, you'll understand something, you'll get some knowledge about that, and take inputs from your from your colleagues, from your peers, from your guides, that what I can improve. Not only your skills, not only your thesis will speak only when you will tell about that self.
Obviously.
Communication, very important, very important. Second, skill development, very important. You just cannot compromise on that aspect. Confidence, very important. Irrespective what is your domain, what is your university, wherever you are a PhD at the end of the day, you should be able to, now this, the golden words, you should be able to sell your skills. Eventually, you should be able to market your skills. And if you are able to market your skills, why we say that Apple is a brand? Because Apple delivers something which is unique. So another point is being unique. And I will relate the things that do not just be engrossed in your thesis. If you want to negotiate on a better platform by the end of PhD, you should have 3 or more feathers in your cap in terms of skills earned. Why we look forward for Apple by the end of September or October? Because we know that they'll be coming up with something unique. That unique is the catch point. If you are able to develop your personality with something unique, to be very honest, the market is flooded with PhDs. The market is flooded with research. How you are different from them, that matters.
Obviously.
So mark yourself, mark your CV with different competencies will allow you to negotiate better. Tell the person, be it from academics, be it from corporate, the one who is going to hire you, how you are going to benefit their organization. So again, if you are able to generate that trust in the employer that yes, I am the one whom you are looking for, half of the negotiation job is done. And do not settle for something which is way too less and eventually compromising on your skill set. No, I would not suggest that. The simple reason for the same is that money is a good motivator. Money is a very important motivator. Just in order to get a job, if you settle on something which you just accept for the time being, but later you would yearn for something better, you'll not be able to put in your heart and soul in the job. So settle for something which will act as a motivator for you, and that will come in the process of negotiation only. That will come when you'll have something unique in your skill set. That will come only when you have worked on yourself. And all that will be presented to the employer only when you will be able to communicate in the effective manner. And that's
I,
what my suggestion to all the researchers.
I remember one time, like when I went for a job after my master's. So that person who was having my technical interview, he said, just explain me your thesis work in 1 or 2 lines.
Absolutely.
Finish. He was like, just explain all of that in 1 or 2 lines.
Yeah.
Don't go beyond 2 lines. And I was like,
Nobody wants to
okay.
listen. Nobody wants to listen. And there comes your communication skills in picture.
And what happens, like when we have to compress all of that in 1 or 2 lines, that's when we come to know what we have actually done. Instead of telling all those things that that don't make sense.
See, what I say is your thesis is your baby.
Hmm.
Nobody else is bothered about that.
Hmm.
How well you can communicate, because nobody has time to listen to your 250 pages research, what you have done. This must be close to your heart. How am I or the employer is bothered about it? So, communicating, effectively communicating is very important, very, very important.
So that was very awesome to know. So before just ramping up the podcast, I'll take you back to that point from where we started, being a Delhiite in UAE. So this will be just a series of quick questions. You have to just rate from 1 to 10 on how much you miss those things. Like
Okay.
being
I'll
a
give you honest
Delhiite,
replies.
being a Delhiite, staying in UAE. So from on the scale of 1 to 10, how much you miss those things, right?
Okay,
Fine.
okay, honestly.
First, the momos.
Oh my god, I miss them badly. I miss them badly.
On the scale of 1 to 10.
I miss them 11.
Metro.
Metro we have here also, so 2.
Slangs.
9. Because I'm from that generation who does not use slang, but still I say that 9, 8 or 9.
Okay. So that's all that I had to ask you for this podcast.
Okay, so I get to know that how the Delhiite are being recognized and by other people.
I'm also I have also been in Delhi for 2 years, and now I'm in Patiala in the
Oh my
Punjab.
god.
So
Wow.
I am like, I also miss all of these things so much.
I can relate to it.
Okay, so this brings us to the end of the podcast. I'm really thankful that you gave us time,
Pleasure is all mine,
and
Chandan.
I hope this podcast will be helpful for those who listen to this. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Chandan, for having me here. It was nice interacting with you, and I hope that whatever views we have shared, they'll be of use of researchers in order to develop themselves for their future. And I wish all of them all the best, and I'm sure that all of them will do wonders.